Scarlet Pimpernel. So I have a lot of thoughts on the movie versus the book. First, let's talk about the book, because that's mainly why I'm talking about it. The book was interesting. I did enjoy it. I thought it was kind of fun, and I definitely love the Scarlet Pimpernel, the idea of the Scarlet Pimpernel. The characters within were interesting. Percy was definitely, I feel like, the most interesting out of all the characters. I loved how in the book it gives you more background into his childhood. We find out that his father had to take care of his mother because his mother was kind of losing her mind. I thought that was interesting, and I also really liked the fact that you kind of got the sense that people felt bad for Percy because they felt like that was the reason why he wasn't very smart, was because his father was so busy taking care of his mother that he got neglected. And I also thought it was really interesting that they traveled so much when he was younger, and that's probably why he was so well equipped for traveling and speaking French and dealing with all these different things. I really enjoyed that. Marguerite in this book was definitely different than what I was expecting. She was a lot more cold in this book than in the movie. She comes off as very self-centered a little bit, and I don't think it was on purpose. I think you were supposed to love Marguerite and think that she was the smartest woman in France. I think that's the author's intention, but I'm afraid I didn't quite like her as much as probably the author wanted me to. I thought it was interesting that she's considered like the smartest woman in France. She was just considered very intelligent, but she didn't quite pick up on any of the hints that Percy might be the Scarlet Pimpernel, not until later. And also that she just kind of wanted to get married because she wanted a guy to kind of just worship the ground that she walked on. I thought that was really immature and selfish, and so I didn't quite fall in love with the Marguerite in this book. And so when the narrator kind of came off as like, oh, poor Marguerite, she's so beautiful, and all these horrible situations are going on, it was really hard for me to buy that and be like, oh yeah, you're right, I feel really terrible for her. Chauvelin, I think that's how you say his name. I do not speak French. Don't massacre me. I thought the way he was portrayed was very interesting. He came off a lot more cold-blooded in this, basically very like, no, I'm going to manipulate you and use you how I want, and I don't feel bad about it at all. I thought that was definitely a more interesting take on the character. So because I grew up with the movie, it's really hard for me not to compare and contrast. This book was fun, but I do think it is very limited because of the time period that it was written. I think that the characters are a lot more one-dimensional, and I think that because of that time period, women were considered less intelligent, not as powerful as men, and also very fragile. I think the ending of this book really explores that a lot more. Spoilers, I'm going to talk about the ending. So Marguerite races to France to save Percy. She does her part. Anyways, her feet are exhausted because she's been traveling so much. And that's fair. Traveling is awful and you do get exhausted. Percy, on the other hand, just gotten beat up to the point where he is severely hurt. But because they have to travel to the ship to get away from France, he carries her. I think the reason why it's so funny is because, again, it feels like he's lifting her up, whereas they should be equal now. She's not in the dark anymore. She knows about his secret. She's there supporting him. They should be equal, and so I feel like a better ending would have been both of them helping. But again, because of this time period, he had to carry her to the ship. I am a huge fan of the movie, and the reason why I'm such a big fan of the movie, and I probably prefer it over the book, is because I believe Marguerite is a lot more intelligent in the movie. She's a lot more proactive. She can pick up on signs that Percy's kind of lying. The way that she interacts with Percy and Chauvelin is just completely different, and I liked how she just kind of seems to be dealing with it as an adult, woman, instead of in the book how it kind of portrays her as like, oh, poor me. She's just like, okay, this is what I gotta do, and unfortunately this is the situation, and yeah, it's hard. Chauvelin in the movie is portrayed a lot differently. In the book, he's just cold-hearted and he's just cruel to Marguerite. In the movie, he's actually in love with Marguerite, and you kind of see he's kind of hurt by her actions because she does marry Percy, and he doesn't understand that. And I do think that there's a lot more dynamic, an interesting dynamic because of that. I also like how it kind of shows you how he can be pretty vengeful if he wants to be, and this is kind of his way of taking advantage of Marguerite and kind of showing her, like, you could have had me, but instead you chose this guy, and so now you're in trouble, kind of thing. And it was definitely interesting. Percy, I feel like, was a lot more interesting too. In the book, he's kind of portrayed as a superhero, basically this perfect character that doesn't have really any flaws, and he's just kind of seen as this guy. But in the movie, he's not quite portrayed that way. He is portrayed as a superhero, of course, as a hero, but he does have this flaw where when he's talking to Armand, Marguerite's brother, and Armand's kind of trying to convince Percy, hey, Marguerite might not be this person you think she is. He kind of refuses to see if she is, and it kind of shows you that Percy, because of his status as the Scarlet Pimpernel, not his status, but because of his secret as being the Scarlet Pimpernel, that he has to kind of push people off, and how that actually might affect him, and why he's not as trusting or as kind or, able to forgive people like normal people. He's very distant. And so I kind of like the fact that it gave him a flaw. The one thing that I do not like in the movie that I thought was portrayed better in the book was that Percy in the movie did kind of get the upper hand on Chauvelin a lot of times, whereas in the book he played the fool no matter what. Like, he was committed to that role. He didn't even try to convince other people, and I feel like that was a lot more convincing in the book. Like, why people would believe that he's not very intelligent. He puts on that show and he doesn't even try to prove other people wrong. Also, I did feel like there were parts in the movie where they made Chauvelin a little dumber in the movie, which was a little frustrating. But overall, I did enjoy the book immensely. I thought it was really good. I would definitely say it was a B-. And then I also love the movie. So if you have a time to read or check out the movie, I would highly recommend it.